Everybody, I want you to all give a warm welcome to Ori Kowarsky. He is an old friend of mine. He's a lawyer in Vancouver. He specializes in entertainment law, also in working with independent films for entertainment law. And he is actually a very good writer and filmmaker as well. And I have known him for a long time and very much trust his opinion. Very glad to have him here. Everybody say hello. Everybody is saying hello, Ori. I don't know if you can see it, but everybody is saying hello. Trista, Lily, Sarah Jane, Brett, nice to see everybody. We're going to start with asking Ori what he thinks about AI. So Ori, how did you come to, actually, before we do that, I want to know, how did you come to entertainment law and what made you specialize in this work? How did this happen?
Well, basically, first of all, I've known Kristen for like an enormous. Kirsten, I've known you for like such an incredibly long time. It's actually scary how long I've known you. Just such a dear friend and such an absolutely amazing and amazing person and such an incredible bright spark. So I'm absolutely thrilled to do anything I can to basically just sort of like give any kind of talk to anyone out there. My interest primarily has been. I think that independent film is something that's really worth basically striving to protect. It's something that's worth doing everything we can to try to maintain and keep it going, particularly in a time where there are all sorts of technological challenges and economic consolidations that have been basically changing the shape of the industry and bending the industry out of shape for at least the past 20 years. I've seen like a lot of like really interesting things happen, and I've seen like the various signposts along the way. I do believe that there will be a point in the future where the economic consolidation that we're looking at will break down, and I think that this will open up new avenues and new opportunities in independent film in the future. And I believe that, with platforms like YouTube, for example, or I know that people have different opinions about things like TikTok, but I mean, there are basically platforms out there that allow people to get their allow people to get their art across and get their message across in a way that bypasses traditional gatekeeping forms of broadcast and distribution. So it's an exciting time now, and I believe that it will be an especially exciting time in the future.
Okay, I'm going to go wild, wild west because we have prepared questions, but when you were talking, I was thinking we have a client, Devin, two clients, Devin and Rowan, who are using TikTok to talk about their experience as a trans man and the partner of a trans man, and the TikTok. Devin's 59, and so this whole experience is an unusual one to see, I think, for someone that age. So there's Devin and Rowan being so open and so warm and also funny in their TikToks, and that's made everybody fall in love with them. Like millions and millions of people are liking and following them, including quite big stars, Rosie O'Donnell and I think Kate Blanchett, and people whose names are following them. Do they need to protect themselves?
Well, it really depends. I mean, if you basically look at, and this is true of YouTube, if you basically look at TikTok's terms of service, at some point where you opened up your TikTok channel and set up your channel, you basically probably clicked on a terms of service, which 99.999% of people don't read, which will basically kind of tell you about who owns the imagery, who owns the clips and that sort of thing. In terms of protection, I would say that as you have like anyone who has like a large TikTok following, a large Instagram following, um, they have to basically start looking at possibly protecting their image and their brand as basically being an asset that they need to start exerting some control over. Now, you will not be able to do that through TikTok outside of their terms of service. It's pretty much locked up. But if anyone is, as a result of success on any kind of platform, is approached to do any kind of influencer work or any kind of brand ambassador work or any kind of advertising, it's at that point that you have to take steps in order to make sure that you have a good lawyer, a good manager, someone to basically make sure that the terms of like what you're signing off on are very narrow and protect you, and just make sure that you're not giving away more than you truly want to do. But in terms of what's on TikTok, you're already like governed by their terms of service, so that's a difficult thing to crack out of. And but it's the issue is sort of like the degree to which the platform gives you the possibility of other opportunities in other markets in media.
And when they're looking into those other opportunities, perhaps that's the time that they should start calling you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like once you're looking at like, again, advertising, brand ambassadorships, perhaps like pitching a show to traditional media like the CBC or something like that. It's at that point that you like really want to start paying very, very close attention to the contracts and what they say about the things like the use of name, the use of likeness, the use of voice, and whether it's like for promotional purposes or artistic purposes. And I can't basically give one size fits all advice, but in general, what you want to do is anything that you are putting out there, you want to make the terms as narrow as possible to make sure that you are as protected as possible.
That is great advice, which also sparks me to go off the path a little bit. We will get to the questions that I told you I would ask you about, but I'm curious about what I've been seeing with some of my clients who are with the bigger agencies and used to be with management companies and are switching to just having a lawyer. So my clients, and also I know other actors are doing this that I have no relationship with. What do you think of that in terms of, I mean, obviously you would have a vested interest in saying that lawyers are fabulous, but what do you think about that? What are your opinions about a client just having an actor just having a lawyer to do all their work?
It really depends. Basically, there are certain things that an agent can do that no one else by law can do. There are certain things that a manager can do that agents and lawyers don't do. And there are certain things that lawyers do that, like, by definition, agents and managers cannot do. The problem is that if you have all three, you have like all sorts of different people like taking a piece of the pie and sending you bills every day. I think it basically comes down to what your needs are. A manager, there are like some extremely intelligent, savvy managers out there, but they probably would not be, unless they are very experienced and have been around the block many, many a time. They may not be able to basically look at a contract, like a service contract, and basically be able to adequately assess what your risks are, what the potentials for things going wrong are. That's what a lawyer can bring to the table. On the flip side, obviously a manager has got contacts that your average lawyer doesn't have. An agent, obviously by definition, has contacts that a lawyer doesn't have. If you are out there and people are already knocking down your door, what you primarily need is a lawyer in order to protect the asset, which is your likeness, voice, and image. If you are new to the game and you want to basically get out there, you do need an agent, and you probably would benefit from a manager to help you with like some sort of like long-term strategizing. So these are like a lawyer, a manager, and an agent. These are like three different tools in the toolkit, and what you particularly need depends on where you are in the evolution of your career.
Right. Okay. I think that it might be beneficial for some people like Devin and Rowan to have an agent as well as, or to have an agent and a lawyer, because of the types of deals that would come their way very quickly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So let's talk about AI, which is what I really wanted to talk with you about. AI and the strike. So when I approached you at first to talk with you, you said you thought the strike would go till September, October. What do you think now?
I think it's still likely. I mean, I don't know. I don't have any kind of like strange crystal ball. I talk to people like everyone else. I talk to people. I talk to people who I think are very smart. I think that there's going to be an overall economic pressure that is going to push the strike to end. Um, Not tomorrow, but definitely, like I would say, within the next 30 to 45 days. On the one hand, there are actors and writers who are at risk of losing their homes, and
Yeah,
there's a definite economic pain. On the other hand, there are studios and distributors who are like they will not be able to make up for lost time, and these studios don't exist without product to fill the
right.
vacuum. I think that there is a general idea. Again, I think that there's sort of like a general idea where there are some people in the studio system who say that they have significant enough libraries that they can just kind of like keep the strike going for like a year and stuff like that. I don't know if those voices will necessarily prevail. I think that basically what you have to keep in mind is that the primary economic driver in entertainment today is streaming services.
Yes, yeah,
And so once you basically see people getting bored and canceling their subscriptions, you are going to start seeing these studios experiencing real economic pain because this is kind of like maybe sort of like a more in-depth thing than people really want to hear. But like we're in a phase right now where the studios, their primary relationship is with Wall Street as opposed to with the audience,
true. Yeah,
which is a very, very definitive change that has happened in the past 5 years.
yeah.
And so when the studios basically find that they are like losing subscribers, that influences their ability to get loans and investment from Wall Street. It's a weird situation. I don't know how much longer it's sustainable, but that's the situation as it currently is. So anyway, just getting back to refocusing on your question, I do think that the strike is going to, both with the writers and the actors, is going to be resolved. I think that it's going to be sort of like a short-term fix, and it's probably going to erupt again in anywhere from 2 to 5 years after the settlement, because at that point, once again, there'll probably be another leap in the technology causing more insecurity. But um, I think this thing will resolve. I think that it has to resolve. If I'm wrong about it, then what it means is that the studios have somehow come to the conclusion that they will have enough money to keep going to basically just sort of like starve the artists out.
The bastards.
Yeah. But I mean, just keep in mind that this is for like sort of like this is for the studios. I mean, obviously, like fairly large independents, A24 being the most the biggest example.
Yeah,
The independents and like even the larger independents have and can sign with the writers and the actors and basically just kind of get their and can basically get their shows and their production schedules back online.
yeah, and you see all sorts of turmoil in amongst the actors and writers with regards to that ability, because some of them are saying, that's strike busting, that's scabbing, and some of them are saying, well, we got to make a living. So I think it's causing problems to no end, having that gray area.
That's entirely possible, but the union speaks for the membership. So like if like A24 signs off on a deal and union leadership says that everything is cool, then I don't really
Cool.
whether it's scabbing or not is more a political question than a legal question. But I mean,
Right.
if they and also like if you're doing an independent film that gets a waiver from the union, I don't really know if that's scabbing if you get a waiver from the union that called the strike. But yeah, I mean, these are kind of like more political, ethical questions that every individual has to answer for themselves.
Indeed. And if you're Canadian right now, you can work on an all Canadian production. So it's actually a really great I need to be Canadian and be an actor or a writer or a filmmaker. Let's go to the question about, there's a bunch of questions coming in from the actors, but I want to just ask you about AI. How do you see AI impacting contract negotiations, agreements for actors? And I want to just amalgamate a couple of questions just because of the time. And how can AI be leveraged to protect an actor's rights or image?
Well, I mean, the short answer is in terms of what we've seen. Like, I haven't been in Google's secret lab or anything like that, but in terms of what we've seen, in terms of what we've seen, AI still leaves a lot to be desired. And I think the question is that we're seeing the tip of the iceberg in terms of what the technology, not what it can do right now, but what it could do in the near future. And I think that for producers, let's say, the opportunity might be to get someone to sign off on their voice and likeness into perpetuity for any project.
Right.
And for and basically, like right now, as I understand it, it's been denied, right? So I mean, AFTRA has denied it, but there is sort of like this rumor going around that one thing that they wanted to do was basically be able to digitize an individual's likeness for, like, quote unquote crowd scenes. And this has not actually been necessarily, and they've denied it. But like WGA leadership has said that was something that they wanted to put on the table. I would basically say this: right now, the technology that is out there that the average person can see and use does not seem to indicate that the technology is robust enough that they can make a digital Ori or a digital Kirsten that will, like, fool people for 2 hours. But it seems to be going on the path that, like, maybe 2 or 3 years down the road, they can.
Yeah.
And so what you want to do when you basically are looking at signing a contract, what you want to do is, and I really strongly recommend that you do this with a lawyer, is basically look to make sure that your name and likeness is involved only on the project and only for the purposes of making and promoting that project.
Right. So project specific, everybody.
It absolutely must be project specific. And like, if it isn't project specific, or they're being like dicey about it, then there might be like something weird going on behind the scenes that you have to, like, either dig deeper into or just kind of think like maybe there's something going on here. And I should basically say, like, there is absolutely no reason whatsoever to digitize someone's likeness in order to do like extras work or crowd scenes. I mean, that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. You've got right now, a computer can basically come up with, like, if you think about movies that take place in ancient Rome or some other planet or Game of Thrones, they can easily digitize 10,000 people who don't even exist in order to put them like in a gladiatorial arena or something like that. So, I mean, all this stuff about digitizing people for crowd scenes makes no sense whatsoever.
They're already doing it.
They're already doing it. With I think what you really want to do is you want to avoid a situation where your face and likeness are in some kind of a library. And as I said, I don't think that is they can certainly digitize you. That's technologically feasible, but to animate it in some human-like way is still doesn't appear to be sort of like publicly available. But who knows what the future will bring.
Question that Devin has is, given should we be trademarking our names? Should we be trademarking is it possible to protect our likeness and our names?
Okay, so your likeness is a copyright issue. So your likeness is basically is essentially a copyright issue, and there's certain rights. There's some, I can't go too deep into it, but basically there are things like rights of personality, rights of publicity. And so your image is basically a copyright issue, and to a certain degree, a right to privacy issue. In terms of trademarking your names, we do trademarks here at Kowarsky Ritson. It's very expensive. It takes a very long time. I have begun the process. If I've begun the process of trademarking the name of a company today, it will probably go through the first inspection about 3 years from now. It takes a very, very long time. Yeah. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't strongly consider it, but it takes forever. And in the meantime, so yeah, I mean, you can basically, the sooner you start it, the sooner you can get your, the sooner you start it, the sooner you can get your actual formal trademark, which is an asset that you can use. But you don't need to have a formal trademark in order to work on creating brand consciousness and brand identity. You can just do that through getting out there into the marketplace and kind of like establishing it that way.
There's a question, somebody is asking, is this information for the Canadian audience or worldwide? Aren't copyright issues different in each location?
There are various international treaties. One is Rome, one is Berne, that basically seeks to standardize copyright and intellectual property trademark issues across the globe. There are some companies that are not signatory to these treaties. It is the question is true that like if something is copyrighted in Canada, it's not necessarily copyrighted in the United States. But in what I would call sort of like the Western world, which would be Canada, the United States, Western Europe, increasingly parts of Asia, the overall legal concepts that govern things like copyright and trademark are more or less the same. And there's a treaty system that's basically trying to bring them all in line so that everyone is speaking the same legal language. But yes, there are countries that are not signatories to those conventions, and they go their own way.
And I guess that doesn't leave, you are unprotected in those countries, so you would have to do a whole new shebang?
No. Well, basically, I mean, let's look at it from the perspective of your average services agreement for an actor. It will basically say that like whatever they're giving up, worldwide in all territories throughout time in any form of media now, currently existing or in the future invented. So, I mean, you're basically giving up your copyright like throughout the universe. And literally there are contracts out there, I've written them, that say, like in every form of technology, whether it exists now or sometime in the future, throughout the universe, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So that basically covers copyright. Trademark isn't necessarily 100%. Trademark will not be relevant to every single actor, but trademark is territorial. So there's a Canadian trademark, a US trademark, a EU-wide trademark. Those are territorial, but that's kind of like, that's a slightly different issue that like certainly a lawyer such as myself can help with, but like trademark is not the same thing as copyright.
Okay. I think I will go to my next question about legal changes. Are there going to be legal changes or considerations that actors should be aware of with regards to AI? Do you think? I guess, because we don't know, right?
It's difficult to say. And the only way that I can really answer that question is to basically kind of say that like intellectual property is a type of law that's only about 200 years old. So things like copyright, trademark, they only exist because of changes made to the law as a result of the ability to reproduce things quickly and exactly mechanically. So, intellectual property always basically moves with the times. It was created because of technology, and it will change because of technology. There was a recent court case out of the United States where a piece of AI artwork was considered not protected by trademark, not protected by copyright, pardon me, not protected by copyright because copyright is meant to protect human artistry and ingenuity and not the artistry and ingenuity of a computer or an algorithm. So that's kind of an interesting case. It's like a low-level US case. It's not the law of the planet, but it is like a very interesting case. So I would basically say that like right now, we're in a time of flux. But in terms of actors, what I would say the one absolute thing that you absolutely have to keep in mind when looking at any contract or agreement is that it must be project specific. It cannot include sequels or prequels. It has to be, you have to be very clear on what purposes you're giving up your name and likeness and voice for. Whether you're, and these are like common questions that we had even like 2 years ago, before this whole AI hype, there was always the question of like, well, make sure that, my likeness can't be used for video games. Make sure that my likeness can't be used for like this. My likeness can't be used for that. And so it's a constant struggle between, actors and writers in terms of what their work can be used for and what it can't be used for, i.e., meaning that you have to pay more money.
What about changing your image? Altering your image? Is there we're having a little internet glitch. I'm not sure if it's showing up for everyone, but it's showing up for me. But what about, I guess contracts would probably be created to protect people from having their image changed by AI. Is that something that's actors need to think about?
That's a really interesting. That is a really interesting question that has not been litigated yet. But yeah, I mean, if someone were to take your image and use like some kind of filter without your permission in order to place sort of like an altered version of yourself, I mean, that's a really, really interesting question that I don't have like a one size fits all answer for. It might basically slip through under the, first of all, if you're a celebrity, it might slip through under basically the provisions for satire and parody.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're not a celebrity and someone just takes your image, alters it slightly, and puts it into like an artistic context that you didn't know about and never intended for, that's probably something where you could get an injunction, which is to say a court order to make it stop. But in order to do that, you've got to basically locate, where the person who's doing this, where they're located. You have to sue them in the jurisdiction. You have to write an angry letter to the platform like YouTube and TikTok. So, I mean, it's a bit of a hassle, and it's an incredibly interesting question. I mean, if someone basically were to turn, The Rock green and like put him into some kind of a parody short, he might have less of a leg to stand on than if someone is basically just taking, something from an actor who's got like 10,000 followers and just
Right.
like taking them and altering their voice and image and putting them in a completely different artistic context. That might be something where you could probably get that taken off with like a letter to YouTube or a letter to Instagram or something. That's a really interesting question. That is a really, really interesting question. I would be very interested in seeing a real life version of that, because I think that there's actually an increasing amount of risk for something like that.
I have a last question for you from another lawyer.
Okay.
Would you say that most entertainment lawyers in BC represent production companies and assist to form production companies for indie and US for indie films and larger US productions? Therefore, they would not be representing talent, as that would be a conflict. I find most lawyers who have vast experience representing talent are in the US. Is this assumption incorrect?
I think that assumption I think that assumption is quite correct. In entertainment law, in a place as small as Vancouver, that you always have to be the lawyer, not you, not the client, but the lawyer always has to be extremely mindful about the possibility of a conflict of interest. But it is possible to both represent a producer and like a single use Canadian entity that's being made for a show. And you can also represent talent, not for the same show, but like just represent talent, for like a different project. But yes, I absolutely agree that things like conflict of interest is something that the lawyer has to be mindful and advise the client about, like, just so you know, I've represented this producer on a different project, so you should be aware of that. But these are things that like a lawyer has to be like aware of, make sure that the client is aware of, and then make sure that you have like something in place to make sure that you are giving your client, 100% your undiluted loyalty.
This is all so fascinating. It's so fascinating, so intriguing, and makes me endlessly curious about what is going to happen in the future. If you could take a guess at what, I know you're not in the business of guessing really, but say you were, if you could take a guess about what's going to happen for actors in the future with regards to AI and ensuring their intellectual property and likeness are protected, what would you say is going to happen?
I would say that in terms of the largest companies that will probably pay you the most amount of money, that there's going to be an ongoing consolidation. I think that a year, maybe like 2 years from now, I think there's going to be 4, maybe 3 streamers that eat everyone else up. I think that once you've got like a small number of streamers that are the primary game in town, as long as they don't basically collapse of their own weight, I think what they're going to do is they're probably going to offer you a deal, and there might be some sort of like evil future, dystopian future where they basically offer you a deal for like the right to use your digitized image for like X number of dollars and some kind of like residual payment down the line or something like that. But right now, I mean, one of the major problems, one of the reasons why people are striking right now is that the streaming services are extremely cagey about their viewership numbers. And it's almost impossible to extract any kind of meaningful viewership information for the purpose of like basically paying meaningful residuals to like actors whose shows are watched by 1 billion people as opposed to watched by 100,000 people. I mean, that's the big question is that they're not showing their books. So in terms of what I think is going to happen, I think that ultimately, and I'm more than happy to be wrong. I think what we're going to look at is further consolidation. And if it isn't broken up as a monopoly by the government, or if it doesn't just kind of like sink of its own weight because it basically spends more money than it takes in, then I think you're going to look at a situation where actors and their lawyers are going to have to look at a situation where they may have to sign away some of their digital persona in return for some kind of like ongoing payment plan. I don't think it's a good idea. I hope we can avoid it. But that seems to be sort of like the fairly bad future that things right now appear to be going to. But I mean, the good news is that there are also platforms like YouTube and TikTok and Instagram where people can basically express themselves and make money and support themselves based on their audience numbers, and those audience numbers are known directly to them, and they get paid through like things like YouTube advertising. So not a perfect solution, but there is like when we talk about entertainment, there are many forms, and I think that sort of like the entire thing is mutating, and it could be that everything that I'm saying will be completely out of date like 5 years from now. You never know.
I have been talking with, actually Donna-Marie and I both have been talking with our clients about making themselves into a small business and creating streams of revenue through things like YouTube and TikTok, selling t-shirts, selling the ability to like a meet and greet, doing things like that, figuring out how to use your celebrity or even create celebrity before you become a famous actor, so that like a mini celebrity, like they're just like Star Trek actors have been doing forever with that kind of thing. That's been my advice in our paid classes. This is a free class. We have paid classes, and I've been starting to do coaching sessions on how to make yourself a small business, because I think what you're saying is true. I think that they're going to have revenue come that way.
I agree completely. And I would basically say that to the extent that you are looking to create an identity, or to the extent that you have an identity, absolutely investigate merchandising. Absolutely investigate merchandising. Merchandising has basically kind of like been the economic driver that's been basically paying for like every, rock tour that's been going on for the past.
Exactly. Years. That was my model. That's so funny. I was thinking of Bon Jovi when I tried to think about how I was going to advise people in the time of AI. I was like, oh, Bon Jovi, they sold more t-shirts than records.
Yep, absolutely. That is absolutely incredible advice. If you basically, and no matter like how big or small your following is, if you have any kind of following at all, then I think that one of the best ways to monetize it, where you get like the majority of the revenue directly to you, is through merchandising. Absolutely. And that's, I mean, like, let me put it this way. I mean, like, Star Wars: A New Hope made a lot of money, but like George Lucas made way more, from merchandising. So I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
always keep your eye on that, because that is something that will and that is something that will keep you independent. It'll be a revenue stream, and it is something that you can count on. And you don't need anyone's permission in order to do that. So yes, that's great
Exactly.
advice. Yeah.
Well, and what I would like my clients to do is have someone like you help them create a legal framework for that, so that they're protected. And I'm not sure how that would be, and I would love to have another conversation at another time about that. But I'm so glad you agree with me, and I'm glad that my clients get to hear you agree with me, so that they'll know the value of this.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Everybody, can we give a big shout out and a thank you to Ori for spending his very precious time a little bit extra. Thank you, Ori.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for your attention. I sincerely hope I said something that is helpful to each one of you, and best of luck with everything. I wish you all great success.
Bye, y'all. See you on screen.